Hey everybody. Hi everybody. Welcome. My name is Matt Pearsall, and I am the community manager here at Committee for Children, and I am very happy to get a chance to bring you our first ever Second Step Ask Me Anything event. And today we're going to be answering questions live that folks have been asking about the Second Step programs and social emotional learning. And I am joined today by Alexandria Roll, who is one of our client success managers, who's going to be helping answer questions for us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Matt.
And also, before we begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. Committee for Children's offices sit on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the first people of Seattle, Washington, the Duwamish tribe. As we honor the Duwamish people and their ancestors, it's also important that we consider our place in the past, present, and future history of the Indigenous peoples of our region, as well as how we best support them. Thank you. So Alex, we got a few questions that have come in today, and I wanted to start off with one of them about middle school. That's something dear to my heart. So one of the members of our community asked, how can we encourage teachers when they've got an advisory program that they're running, and they want to know how they can encourage teachers to actively buy into the advisory program as a way to build relationships with students?
And I think that's a great question, Matt. I'm also a former middle school teacher, so that is an area that's near and dear to my heart. And we know that during the middle school years, that's where students tend to deal with a lot of isolation, they deal with bullying, and they really are dealing with a lot of big emotions, and they may not have an outlet for it. So as teachers, we know that all of those emotions are going to come into our classroom, they're going to impact our environment, and we really want to make sure that we're giving students a safe place to really express them. And so oftentimes teachers don't understand the purpose of an advisory program. You know, sometimes we just see it as something that's taken time away from what we already want to do in our classroom, and really just framing it as a way to support students, give them a way to build that relationship, and to be able to have a safe place where they have an adult that they are able to go to when there's a situation. A great way to get teachers to buy into it is to actually do it with teachers. So if you have some of those advisory lessons that are in the program, in our middle school program, to actually pull those out in a staff meeting and have teachers engage in it themselves and just see how it's going to get the conversation flowing, that's a really good way to get people excited about it and to see that there's a purpose to it and that it's really going to help open those lines of communication.
Great, thank you very much. So I appreciate the person asking about that as well, because advisories, they can be fun and awesome, but they're also very hard. And so I think there's some great ideas about how folks can kind of move through that to get to a place where the advisory works really well. So another member of our community asked a question around kind of how can, as second step users, as SEL educators, as educators in general, how can we help heal the harm that students have felt over the last few years due to the pandemic?
Another great question. I think one of the big areas where we've seen students impacted the most with the pandemic is that for an extended period of time, students were out of the classroom, they were at home, they were isolated, they were away from their peers. And now we are pretty much having to help them build out those skills that they missed out on. So one of the ways that we can help them is, one, giving them a space to share how they're feeling. We want to open up the lines of communication. This kind of goes back into that advisory, but even if you're dealing with the elementary school students, you want them to know that they are able to talk about what they're feeling, that there's a safe place, and that it's okay to have all of those big emotions that may come with being back in the classroom. Whether that's being a little anxious, maybe that's, not knowing how to interact with some of their peers, but just knowing that they have someone that they can talk to and that you're working on it with them. Another great way to help them heal is to make sure that you are building out community in your classroom. So having those different activities where students can get to know each other, they can practice some of those skills that maybe they haven't had a chance to use in a while. That's going to be a great way to help them. And Matt, I know you're also a teacher, you're a former teacher yourself. Do you have any ideas about how we could help heal the harm?
Well, I think it's also, I mean, I appreciate a lot of the stuff that you're saying. I think they're great ideas. And I think it's also something that can be really effective is that, I mean, it's not just students that have felt the effects of the pandemic, it's the adults in the classroom too. And to whatever extent you are comfortable sharing kind of your own experiences of the pandemic or some of the things that you've faced and dealt with, I think you kind of doing that as an exemplar, showing students how to talk about these things by talking about them yourself and having a frank conversation about it can be really powerful. And when students are able to see you as a real human being, as opposed to just that teacher that they see at school, not only does it help them to kind of see how to process their own feelings, it also just helps build strong relationships. I mean, it's a key to building really better relationships that can help in all sorts of different ways.
Thank you.
Ooh. And I can also put a plug in for our community rebuilding units that we have on our free SEL resources page. I mean, I'm laughing because this is a thing that I worked a lot on a couple of years ago, but I actually think that, and we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback about them. They were built specifically to help rebuild community in the wake of the pandemic. And we've updated them since because we got a lot of good feedback on them. Into being more evergreen resources. They're absolutely free. They stand on their own. It's a unit of four lessons that we have for grades, kindergarten through grade 8. And they are a great way to start kind of building, to really intentionally build community in your classroom, which can be a great buffer for students who are dealing with stresses outside of the classroom due to the pandemic or to other things in their lives.
Yes, we do love those community rebuilding units. And I thank you for bringing up the teachers. Even though I myself am a former teacher, I sometimes forget when I'm talking about the effects of the pandemic that the adults were just as affected by it and they've had to carry the brunt of that. So we do want to make sure that we are providing resources for them as well and just giving them space to heal too. So that's just one of the ways that we're able to do that is with our social emotional learning for adults program, our SELA program. It's really around building trust with those adults, because the same way we need to build out that community with our students and help them form that safe place, we need to do that with ourselves in the building, as well as with our students. So that's a great way to do that.
And for those of you that might be watching live right now, I just want to remind you that if you're on Twitter or Facebook, Facebook's having some technical issues right now. So hopefully you can watch if you're on Facebook or on YouTube. If you go ahead and post questions that you have, we'll answer them live right here on interwebs. But in the meantime, we've still got more questions that people have submitted ahead of time. Another question that we've got is, so there's some schools that are finishing up with the core social emotional learning program with Second Step right now, core Second Step. And they're looking for how they can continue to do SEL work, to do things that are aligned with Second Step program that support the work they've done after they've completed the lessons. Do you have any ideas on tips or resources that they can use to do that work?
Yes, we actually have a ton of resources. For those of you who are using the digital program, we know that for elementary, you only have 20 lessons in the program, for middle, about 26, 27. And so we realize that there are a lot more weeks in the school year. And so that's why if you are in your dashboard, you will see that there is, for elementary, an activities tab. And in that activities tab, you will see not only all of the brain builders, which you can, of course, do outside of the lessons. Great way for kids to practice those skills. But you also have some additional activities that have been added for each unit. So for each of the units, there's 3 additional lessons that are going to reinforce those skills that were taught in the 4 units of the program. And those lessons are going to be a fun, engaging way to get the students to work with that skill in a unique way. So one of the ways, I know that those 3 units, those 3 lessons are going to work on engaging with the skill via movement, art, and music. So just a fun, creative way to get them engaged with the skill. For our older kids, we, of course, have those advisory activities that are in the dashboard as well. So you'll see that in that top ribbon right next to teach. And there are over 200 of those advisory activities. They work on all different skills. You can actually search them by theme. So if there's something specific that you want to work on with your students, maybe there's a group in your class that's having some issues in a certain area, you can pull a specific advisory activity to work with those students. And then outside of that, we also have some meeting packs, which are just a great way to help students get to know their fellow classmates and just continue working on that conversation, that relationship building, which we can all do some work on in every area. And then I think the last thing that I'm thinking about in our program are also the Mind Yeti. Those are also going to be in that, they're going to be located in the dashboard, but that's a great way to get students working on mindfulness. And they're going to love calming those hubbles down. So that's just a fun way to help them practice managing those really big emotions that they have.
Hey, thank you. So the next question that we've got is something kind of comes up. I think I hear this a lot. I hear this a lot a lot of times in relation to the bullying prevention unit and the child protection unit. But in all of our programs, this comes up sometimes. Somebody's asking how they should handle situations where students disclose personal information. And in this particular case, they're wondering about information that gives insight into the behaviors why they might be struggling in school, behaviors they're having that are making it hard for them to connect with school. For instance, if a student were to reveal during a second step lesson that their family is going through a divorce.
Those are always tough conversations to have, but we know as educators that students are always going to open up and share things with us because we're the adult that's with them the majority of their waking hours of the day. But I know that when we're dealing with that information, we do have to be very careful about our next steps. Now, the first thing we always want to make sure is that as we've been having these conversations with kids in our classroom, we've already built trust with them so that they feel confident to come to us and talk to us about these things. But through that trust, we want to make sure that they understand that it's our number one goal to make sure that they are safe. So if ever they're disclosing something that's not going, that indicates that they're not safe, we want them to know that we are going to talk to someone else, another adult. We're going to make sure that we're doing everything with the intent of keeping them safe. And then we also want to think about bringing in our counselors, anyone who is specifically trained to deal with that issue. And we want to make sure that we are addressing it in a way that is going to best take care of our students. And when necessary, bring in the parents. But I think for the student, the main thing is making sure that they understand that we are doing everything to keep them safe. And that's our number one goal.
Thank you. I think, yeah, it's something that can catch a lot of educators off guard when that happens, when you're teaching social emotion and teaching second step lessons, because you are kind of connecting with students at a different level. You're and you build a level of trust with them through this social emotional learning work where they may feel comfortable sharing something with you that they wouldn't otherwise feel comfortable. One thing that I would add to the excellent advice they just gave is also that it could be startling and depending on what students are saying can be really disconcerting potentially. But I think to really if you get a moment to reflect, to realize the level of trust that it takes for a student to share that with you, and to recognize what that says about the relationship you have with the student, and that you're doing a really good job and you're doing really good work helping and supporting that student for them to be comfortable to say something like that to you. All right, we've got one last question, unless people want to jump in and ask them live. This one is kind of a good nuts and bolts question around second step lessons are full of interactivity where students pair off and talk amongst themselves, do think, turn, tells, to kind of connect with and process the skills that they're learning. What are some good strategies for quickly pairing students up in a group? I think this particular person has some strategies they use, but they'd like to do some new stuff, and they're wondering if you've got any ideas.
Well, I know in the classroom, one thing I always wanted to do was make sure that I was giving students the opportunity to have these conversations and pair up with different students. So we don't want them to always do their turn and talk with the person right next to them, because especially if we're working on building out these relationships in this social emotional work, we want to give them the opportunity to talk to a lot of different students. So one thing I used to do in the classroom, and of course, this is after, you know, having spent the beginning of the school year working on processes and how things work, you know, in the classroom, but we would play music, and the students would know that as soon as the music went off, they had to be next to their partner. So this gave them a chance to move around. They got excited about it, but they knew that the moment the music stops, they had to be with someone. Other times I've allowed students to like pair up. I've told them find someone wearing the same color as you, or, you know, just giving them fun ways that'll get them a little excited about something that maybe they're not necessarily excited about, and lets them get up and move around the room, because I know kids, they just love that opportunity. What about you, Matt?
You know, I think, you know, I approach this from a middle school educator, from a secondary educator point of view. Where sometimes getting kids up and wandering around and doing things can feel a little bit daunting. And I always felt like in that place that it's nice to have structures in place. When you're teaching the lesson, that's not necessarily the best time to like get people thinking about who their partner should be. But in general, just making sure to mix things up, to do different, assigning people partners differently, and to engage and take a moment with your students to engage them in that process to a certain degree, to say, now we're going to have different partners this week or next week, or we're going to have a different partner for a second step than we are going to have for our math time, and making sure that students know who those people are and they're engaged in the process of selecting that. To let's not get carried away. Let's not let everyone pick their own partners in middle school. That's crazy talk. But, you know, to at least give the illusion of participation.
It can be done, and it can be done in a fun way. Just have to work on building out those classroom procedures ahead of time.
Yeah, definitely.
But they do appreciate it, and especially if you have, you know, given them that caveat that if we do it well, we can continue doing it this way, they are more likely to try to make sure everybody is on target. Well,
that brings us to the end of this. No, we don't have any live questions that have come in, so we're going to wrap things up. I want to thank you, Alexandria, for joining us today, and for our inaugural Ask Me Anything. We're going to be doing another one of these in a month. Fourth Tuesday of every month at this time, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing these, but you can submit your questions to us ahead of time in our Second Step community, or on Twitter or on Facebook. We'd be happy to take those questions and collect them and answer them right here next week. If you can't attend live, you can watch us as a recording. So until then, Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to answering those questions again next month.
And thank you to everybody who is here today, live or in a recording. I just want to let you all know that if you would like to have more conversations like these, not just with people from Second Step, but fellow educators who are using our programs to teach social emotional learning, please join our educator community on Facebook, where you can connect with thousands, now over 10,000 educators across the country and around the world, who are really dedicated to social emotional learning in the Second Step program. So look us up there. And until then, we will see you all next week. Thank you very much.